Did you ever wonder what would happen if Subaru was never summoned to the ReZero world? As the key to many events in the series, how would the world play out if Subaru wasn't around to control outcomes? What would happen to characters like Emilia, Ram, Beatrice, Roswell, the royal candidates, or even the witches? That's what we will find out today, by making a complete scenario of the possible events that would occur with the absence of Subaru. From the events of Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, and at the later part of the video, the novel arcs in Wallachia. Obviously with a spoiler tag before I get into those. But before we start, we'll need to settle a little condition. Subaru was supposed to be there, but for some reason he's not. Like he just decided not to go out of home, or Sotelo was asleep. So abilities that can show the future will still predict the arrival of Subaru. And that is because it would be impossible to predict where many characters would be if Roswell didn't manipulate them with the sole goal of Subaru's arrival. With that settled, let's start from Arc 1, the arc of the loot house. In the original, Subaru first meets Emilia, and after some failed loops, he manages to save her from the Elsa attack. And all of these events were manipulated by Roswell, as he contracted both Elsa and Felt to steal the insignia from Emilia, so Subaru could save her and be taken to the mansion. A pretty nice approach for the manipulative clown. But what if Subaru wasn't there? The first events would pretty much play out the same. Felt would steal Emilia's insignia and go to the loot house. As we saw in the third loop, Emilia was still capable of arriving first than Elsa, even without Subaru's help. However, not long after, she would be attacked by Elsa. Bach would defend her and go to sleep a few minutes later. Emilia may be able to hold her ground for a bit, but Elsa would easily wipe out all of the people present in the loot house. So this would be the end for Felt, Rom, and Emilia. And as we know, Emilia's death is the trigger to activate her contract with Bach, which would turn into the Beast of End form and destroy the whole world. And that's exactly what would happen. Bach would freeze everything in the vicinity with his magic and kill Elsa on the spot, before heading to destroy the entire capital. But before this could happen, as it was Reinhardt's day off and he was around the capital, he would sense the threat and get there in an instant, probably managing to avoid deaths after the radius of the slums, and would deal with Bach using the Dragon Sword Raid, which would finish the beast in one fell swoop, just like we saw in the failed loop scenario of the Sanctuary. With Felt's death, Reinhardt would have no purpose to participate in the royal selection, and would continue living a sad, unheroic hero life without any real sense of purpose, other than being the weapon of the kingdom, due to the absence of the girl named Felt, who tried to show him his human side. And before we move on to Arc 2, I'd kindly ask you to click the subscribe button, if you are enjoying the content, obviously. It helps me a lot and you receive it more often in your homepage, so go ahead and click it. Thank you. Anyway, Roswell would receive the news of the loot house incident and would be shocked. Roswell's only way to reach his goal of reviving Echidna was to get his hands on the dragon's blood, which has the power to do any miracle, including revival. And it was the Book of Wisdom that showed him the steps to acquire it. First getting an eligible candidate for the throne, then finding the guy with the power to redo events and manipulate them to his goal. So without both essential keys to achieve it, it would be utterly impossible to reach the dragon's blood. Upon realizing this, he would instantly go out of the mansion to the capital in order to find the guy with the power to redo events, in his last bit of hope of getting Emilia back. But to his unfortune, it would turn out to be unsuccessful, and Roswell would fall into a deep depression, just like in the Raw Thief when Subaru deserted from the mansion. In the meantime, Ram would get infected by the Wolgarm's curse and unfortunately die. Meili was the one controlling them, and although her motives to do that are still unclear, we know it was not Roswell contracting her or Elsa telling her to do so. So we can assume it was Mother, which is probably Capella. So she would follow that path regardless of Elsa's death. And what would happen to Meili after that? Well, I don't know. Maybe she would follow Capella from then on. Without her beloved little sister, Ram loses her whole purpose in life and would probably search for the responsible of the curse, seeking revenge for her sister. Without Ram, Frederica would return to the mansion just like in the Raw Thief, and would serve the depressed Roswell. Oh, and Petra would not aspire to join the maids because Subaru never really inspired her to do so she would keep being a regular kid. And as you can see, in just 2 arcs that spent for about 5 days on their timeline, there's already a lot of changes. But there will be more in Arc 3. The royal selection would be shortened to just 3 candidates, as Emilia has been killed by Elsa and Felt is also dead and was never discovered by Reinhardt to begin with, leaving only Anastasia, Crush, and Priscilla as the participants, beginning the royal campaigns. But This number would not long after be shortened after Crush gets attacked by the White Whale and gets her existence erased. This happened in both Pride and Agonal Eves, where she was erased fighting the White Whale, while her allies seemingly escaped and joined other factions. Felix, however, is the one who suffers the most with this situation, as in both Eves he gets depressed and in an existential crisis. With her being erased, he simply has no other person to have his memories assigned to. This also means that the White Whale will never be defeated, and Wilhelm will never have his revenge, living the rest of his life with the anguish of his wife's loss, and never forgiving his grandson. Another major event that takes place here is Betelgeuse, the Sinner's Bishop of Sloth. The Gospel would tell him to go to Rosal's manor in order to get the body of the Elf Elf. And albeit her being dead already, he would still go there as he follows the scriptures like his life depends on it. This means that the whole Arlen village would fall to him, as well as the entire manor. And although Frederica would be able to stall them for a bit, Roswell is still depressed and would probably not retaliate on the attack and would let them end his life. Unsuccessful with their mission, Betelgeuse and the witch cult would retreat with the mansion entirely destroyed, only leaving one single person alive, Beatrice. In the original story, Beatrice is the only survivor of the multiple raids on the failed loops of Arc 3, so it's pretty safe to assume she would survive here as well, as she was incredibly strong and was protected in a place where she had complete control over. However, this is not as great as you may think. Beatrice was still waiting for the arrival of that person, and although Subaru proved to her that said person did not exist, he was the one saving her from her 400-year waiting. And in a scenario without him, Beatrice would keep for all eternity sitting in front of the door, waiting for the arrival of the one who could end her suffering. Oh, and yeah, Otto would also die to the witch cult because there would be no one to save him when he got captured. Arc 4 would have no reason to happen as well, as Roswell wouldn't be there to manipulate the events and Emilia to take the trials. Echidna and all the witches would never meet Subaru, and Omega would never be a thing as the snow would never fall in the sanctuary. As you probably guessed, the White Rabbit would also not be defeated. Garfield would then receive the news of the death of his sister and Roswell, which would infuriate him and feed his trauma of the outside world. So he would end up living the rest of his life protecting the people of the sanctuary, never allowing anyone to take the trials. He would also never overcome his past and find the truth about his mother who left, or even know that she was alive in Pristella. And talking about Pristella, let's move on to Arc 5. The start of the arc takes a look over the current situation of the royal selection over the 1-year time skip. So let's take a look over how they would approach their campaigns on this 1v1 duel between Anastasia Hoshin and Priscilla Boreal. Anna, being a cunning merchant whose strategies revolve around economic manipulation and strategic alliances, would approach a campaign focused on exploiting Priscilla's overconfidence and arrogance, as well as expanding her economic leverage throughout Lugunica. She would likely work to form alliances with key figures like Wilhelm van Astria, offering him information about the White Whale attack reports, and would try to find a way through the Margrave family's successor Annie Rose Mill, which succeeded everything Roswell had. Priscilla, on the other hand, is way more stubborn with her ideals and would not really seek alliances with people. Instead, they would naturally come to her. You see, with Crush's erasure, Priscilla is the candidate with the biggest influence over Lagunica's royal forces, as she was married to a very wealthy noble of the Bariel family, one of the most important families in Lagunica. But since he died, she's the one who rules over their territory and has the highest monopoly in Lagunica between the two candidates. So I believe her camp would retain most of the royal guard, including the commander himself, Henkel, just like in the original. With some luck, they may even borrow Reinhardt, although I don't believe she would 100% assign him as one of her knights due to her self-centered personality, and Aldebaran is very happy with this information. Like in the original story, she would help those who worked hard and cultivate a very loyal following. I believe their political clashes would be way more aggressive than in the main story, due to their incredibly strong ideals and beliefs. Due to this, there is no reason for Anastasia to hold an event in Pristella, because if in the original story she couldn't really find anything special to take advantage over Priscilla, let alone here where it's straight up a 1v1. So they would probably stay around their own territories doing their own things. This is kind of a prediction based on side stories because we can't really tell where the characters would be, but Priscilla would most likely be around the Burial Estate, while Anastasia would be in either Kararagi or the Jukulius also. This means that the raid of the witch cult in Pristella would barely have anyone to stop them. Upon the first communication of the attack, attack, Kiritaku would rush to call Anastasia asking for help. Panicking with the situation, as the wealthy city she was allied with was in danger, she would send close forces to defend the city. Arriving there, they would fight for the city, but would struggle with the witch cult, especially because of serious authority, which would slowly amplify their negative emotions along with every civilian in the city. Without anyone to figure out their authority and turn it back into emotions of hope like Subaru's incredible speech, it would be utterly impossible to undo this effect, even if the strongest knights fought there. Regulus, the sinner's bishop of Greed, would be extremely infuriated that he couldn't find any worthy wife with silver hair for his harem. He would loudly claim that his waste of time is a disrespect for his rights and would start wreaking havoc throughout the city, quickly destroying everything in front of him. Unable to fulfill the witch cult's demands of giving the witches bones, the entire city would fall to Regulus' havoc before it could even flood in water, ending with the destruction of the entire city. Characters like Liliana, Garfield's mother and half-siblings would be included in this calamity. Quick interruption, spoilers from Season 3 Part 2 and the rest of the novels will start from here, so if you are watching this video before you watch Season 3, spoilers ahead. If you are watching after Season 3 ends, just look at the chapters down on the video timeline so you can see each arc I will be talking about and skip the one you haven't read. Here's the timestamp to the end of the video if you want to help my engagement not fall off, but if you want to leave, just comment, like and subscribe. Back to the video. Teresia and Kurgan would keep working under the witch cult for as long as the reviving spell works. And as you probably noticed already, by this time the witch cult had suffered a grand total of 0 losses. Moving on to Arc 6, it wouldn't happen as well, as there is no one to conquer the Pleiades watchtower, which means that Shala would keep Honor long awaiting for a master's return as the protector of the watchtower, and no one really would ever be able to cross away there, as not even Reinhard was able to do it alone. Without the aid of characters with useful abilities like Melee and Subaru, there's almost no way one can reach it. And I mean, even after conquering it, they still need Melee to cross the desert. And we finally come to the events of Arc 7 and 8, taking place in Volakia, Priscilla's hometown. These arcs are not 100% dependent on Subaru, so they would happen regardless of his presence. However, it's a bit difficult to explain due to the amount of things going on during that whole civil war, and it could go many different paths than the one I'm going to theorize here. So make sure to watch this part with some context of the stuff that happened in this arc and take it with a grain of salt. Anyway, in the original story we are introduced to Volakia once Subaru is teleported along with the amnesic ram and the factory resetted Rui Arnhem, which, believe it or not, are arguably the most important pieces for this arc's resolve. The first interaction with other Volakian characters we have is when Subaru dies to Tarita's harem. Tarita was the Shodrakian assigned with her friend's role to kill the traveler with black hair and black eyes, in order to prevent them from triggering the Great Disaster, which would spell the end for the Empire. Her friend was Marielai, a former stargazer. Stargazers are people in the sacred Valakian Empire who have the ability to peer into the future by reading the stars. And as we established earlier, prophecies that predict the future would still predict Subaru. So we can assume that Tarita would still hunt down a boy with black hair and black eyes, but unsuccessfully. And guess who has those physical traits as well? Vincent Valakia, the Emperor, who was lurking around the forest. However, he would not be hunted down because his head was wrapped around, and by anime logic, you can't see his hair. In this version, he wouldn't find Subaru in the forest to give him his knife, so he would probably spot Tarita and follow her to the Shudrak tribe. And I don't believe he would waste much time like in the main story due to not having a previous plan to introduce Subaru to the Shudrak as a trustworthy ally. I believe he would reveal his identity straight away before the judgment with the Mabi snake, and would use the Oni mask as the proof of his alliance with the Shudrak. And even if he did have to fight it, we know he was still holding the Yang sword, so it would be rather impossible for him to perish here. The absence of Subaru also means that the Mabis wouldn't attack Todd's camp due to Subaru's miasma. In the main story, Vincent was already planning to go to Goral, and that's probably what he would do along with the Shudrak tribe for his protection. From here on, it's a bit hard to predict how things would play out, but let's assume that Todd and his allies would pass by Goral as it's the closest city, to possibly gather information about the location of the Shudrak. While there, one of the officers would see a man with the Oni mask surrounded by a group of women warriors, calling out war against the Shudrak, which would start a fearsome conflict between the two opposing forces. Upon Arakia's arrival to the Valakian troops' side, the battle would be quickly turned upon the Shudrak, and while defending their tribe, Mizelda, the leader of the Shudrak, would end up fatally injured. Without Ram to heal her, she would end up passing out. Seeing the battlefield completely against him, Vincent Vincent would prepare to unsheath his last resort, the Yang Sword. But before it could happen, Priscilla would arrive with her own Yang Sword and put a temporary end to the conflict, as Rukia pretty much refuses to attack her girlfriend and would threat joining the rebel side, which would make the Valachian forces retreat. Aldebaran and Enkel would accompany her, just like in the original. However, in this version, all didn't really change much his perception to the world, as Subaru was not there, so he would be way more attached to Priscilla and would follow her whether she liked it or not. Vincent would reveal his plan to Priscilla to ask for Yerna's help in Chaos Flame, while she stayed in Goral. However, in this version, Vincent does not have the assistance of Subaru and Medium to help him deliver the letter. I believe he would find other people to do this for him, and it would pretty much work without the conflict with Albert because Subaru wasn't there to declare war against them, which would avoid the destruction of Chaos Flame caused by Satella. In the meantime, Goral would be attacked by Madeline, which would prompt Priscilla to stall her, while Aldebaran activated his authority to assure the best possible outcome. In this scenario, I think Priscilla would come victorious in the battle even without Emily's help, due to Al's guidance. And although things seem to be going somewhat great until now, it's from here that the big disasters would start. Todd and Arakia would arrive in Ginnenhive and would wipe out the entire city of the gladiators, which would lead to the death of characters like the whole Pleiades battalion and even Cecilus, the strongest divine general, who had been turned into a children, pretty much like the failed loops we saw in the original. Returning to Goral now with Yerna, Vincent would reunite with Priscilla and Al, and the battle for the imperial capital would begin. Just like in the original, the many different faces of the war would appear to fight in Lupagana. But this is when the table would be turned, and Shisha's plan of sacrificing himself for Vincent would come to a successful end, dying in his place and marking the start of the Great Disaster. And what is the Great Disaster? Well, it was a prophecy that Ublik, this one stargazer, predicted. And Stride Wallachia had also predicted before, despite instead of a stargazer being just a genius maniac. It basically consisted of a huge conflict where the deceased citizens of Wallachia were resurrected as undead soldiers by the witch Sphinx, and some big and troublesome names like Hugard Wallachia, aka King of Thorns, and Baloroy Tumaglyph, former divine general, were revived. Despite not a single soul being able to defeat Hugard himself on a one-on-one, as they killed Cecilus, which was basically their only chance. He is not even the biggest problem here, because Sphinx had found a way to make the sacrament of the Immortal King run indefinitely, with the aid of the Great Spirit Muspel. That stone basically had copious amounts of mana and supplied the spell to work passively, so even if you kill the zombie, it will revive and multiply, which is, to say the least, scary. The only way to kill a zombie was by targeting the soul, and only the Yang Sword was capable of doing it, or Rui herself by eating their name. Most importantly, only Rui was able to defeat Sphinx herself, and if she's not defeated, the spell will never stop. With that said, even after the reveal of Vincent's identity and the union of the Valachian forces, it wouldn't be enough to stop the relentless amount of undead soldiers. Not even a fair fight would be possible here, because people like Madeline would be against them, and without Subaru with the whole battalion of allies he gathered, Beatrice to throw the Al-Shamaks, Garfield to stall the dragons, Alibel to stop Hugard, and many more, including obviously Rui, it wouldn't be possible to save the Empire in any stretch of the imagination. So in the end, the self-proclaimed Witch of Greed would wreak havoc with their plan on revenge on Priscilla, wiping out the entire Valachian Empire. And all of this because of this one guy, man. If Lape never rescued Sphinx out of greed to be Legunica's ruler, this whole butterfly effect would never happen. Al would be right by Priscilla's side to protect her and possibly retreat, but it would take an infinite amount of loops to convince her of leaving her own hometown to be destroyed. And honestly, not even I can think how this would end besides what? 300,000 loops worthy of avoiding Sphinx schemes, then 500,000 worthy of convincing Priscilla to leave, and 1 million to actually run? So yeah, although things went good in the early Act 7 because Vincent is a naturally intelligent guy and would find a way to his plans without Subaru, it was all a bait for you to think things would go better without him, when in reality no one but the hero himself would be able to stop Sphinx. And with this, we come to the end of this video. Obviously, there could be many changes on the script, as everyone has a different interpretation of the characters and world building, and a lot could change in the Council of the Lugunica Kingdom due to the amount of calamities happening. but that's a bit hard to predict and would take much more time to explain multiple scenarios, so I leave that for you to discuss in the comments and even share ideas of what could happen in this horrid scenario. Maybe this video can show some people how important this guy actually is, instead of complaining that he does nothing. Talking about that, do you want to know what happens to Subaru in this scenario where he stays on Earth? I have the perfect video for you, where you can find the exact explanation for this and even more details of the ReZero world. So go ahead and click to find it out. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I see you there.